Welcome in, everyone. Today we're going deep, really deep into the African-American labor movement
Yeah, specifically how it shaped things right here in Minnesota.
and what we can learn from it moving forward, right?
Exactly.
Now we've got some really interesting stuff to dig into.
Oh, yeah.
We've got excerpts from a presentation, it's called.
Building the Backbone.
Yeah.
The legacy of African American labor in shaping Minnesota and beyond.
That's it.
Yeah.
And we also have this really powerful audio piece that focuses on,
Black labor's contribution to American prosperity really captures that spirit.
yeah, and it made me think, like, have you ever wondered how certain communities can thrive even when they've faced, just enormous historical obstacles?
It's incredible, right?
Yeah, and that's what we're going to explore today.
Yeah, it's a story of resilience and innovation, and honestly, it might surprise you.
Yeah, definitely.
These sources, they don't just tell us what happened, just the facts. They show us how the legacy of this movement can actually guide us toward a more equitable future.
It's like a roadmap, almost.
Yeah, and it's not just labor history. It's about understanding how communities are built,
Oh, yeah.
how economic power is generated, and how cultural influence plays a role in all of that.
So where do we even begin with all of this?
Let's start with something that's often overlooked. The
Right.
role African Americans played in building Minnesota's railroads.
Mhm.
Their work was absolutely essential to this state's development.
Yeah, and then there's the Rondo neighborhood in St. Paul,
Right.
which wasn't just a place where people lived, was it?
No, not at all.
It was a center of Black entrepreneurship, cultural expression, all of that. A
Exactly.
real hub.
And then we have this pivotal moment, the
Yeah.
construction of I-94, which basically sliced right through Rondo.
Yeah, it's a story that a lot of people know,
It is.
and it raises all sorts of questions about urban development.
Absolutely.
About, displacement of communities,
Mhm.
the long-term consequences
Yeah.
of, those big infrastructure decisions.
Because it wasn't just about changing the city physically.
Right.
It disrupted the economic heart of this community.
Right.
Businesses were lost. The vibrancy of the neighborhood was deeply affected.
So we're not just looking at some historical event in isolation here.
Nope.
We're seeing how decisions made, like, decades ago can still have these ripple effects.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how does this tie into, like, the bigger picture of model labor movements?
Well, it highlights a key challenge that these movements often faced, right?
Yeah.
Decisions made outside of their communities
Right.
that directly affected their livelihoods.
Hmm.
And it makes you wonder, are we repeating those same mistakes today?
Yeah.
When we plan these big projects now, are we genuinely thinking about the needs of all the communities involved?
Especially those who have been historically marginalized.
Especially those.
Yeah. Those are questions that we absolutely have to be asking.
For sure.
It's like, how can we learn from the past to create a more equitable future? Right.
That's the whole point.
That's what makes this history so important to understand.
It really is.
Now, the presentation also talks about 3 amazing Black women
Oh, yes.
who are really key in shaping Minnesota's labor movement.
Absolutely.
Clara Shahan, Ruth Bell, and Dorothy Mae Robinson.
These are names we should all know.
Yeah, tell me more about them.
Their stories, they really embody this whole fight for fairness and equity. Like Clara Shahan,
Yeah.
she was an early member of the Minnesota AFL-CIO,
Wow.
and she really advocated for Black workers,
Mhm.
especially women, at a time when their voices were often ignored,
Yeah, it was a different time.
It was.
And it sounds like she was a true trailblazer, given that time period.
Oh, absolutely.
Were there any specific challenges that she faced that really stood out to you?
Well, a lot of the unions back then had these discriminatory practices built right into their structures.
Oh, wow.
It's baked right in.
Yeah.
And Clara, she had to challenge those structures from within.
From the inside.
Yeah, it's a model we see all the time in history, right?
Mhm.
Where advocates work both inside and outside of the existing systems to try and change things.
It's not always about tearing everything down.
Right.
Sometimes it's about, strategically working within the system.
To change it from within.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What about the other women?
Okay, so Ruth Bell.
Mm.
She was a prominent figure in the NAACP.
Okay.
And she bravely challenged segregation in the workplace.
Wow.
while also organizing Black workers to demand their rights.
So it was this two-pronged approach.
It was.
Yeah.
We see that a lot in effective movements.
Right.
Dismantling the discriminatory systems
Mm.
while also empowering those who are marginalized by those very systems.
So it's about pushing for systemic change, but also making sure people have the tools and support.
To advocate for themselves.
Right. Yeah, that's a powerful combination.
It really is.
And Dorothy Mae Robinson, what was her story?
She was an incredible leader and educator,
Mhm.
dedicated her life to creating equal opportunities
Wow.
in education and employment for Black women.
It's amazing how these women, despite all the challenges they face,
Oh, yes.
still managed to create lasting change.
They did.
You know, they paved the way for so many others. Their legacy is just so inspiring.
Their stories show a key takeaway from these model labor movements.
What's that?
That individual courage, combined with strategic action, can lead to really substantial progress.
Okay, so we talked about the backbone of this movement here in Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
but it's clear that the impact goes way beyond just our state, right?
Absolutely. From here, we kind of move beyond just labor history, right?
Okay.
And we look at the wider landscape of Black innovation and cultural leadership.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we see the model of the labor movement impacting other parts of society.
Okay.
We see stories of Black consumers shaping market trends.
Well,
Black labor playing a key role in building institutions like HBCUs,
Hmm.
and Black leadership driving these social movements that have impacted cultural trends across the entire nation.
I'm really curious to hear more about these stories.
Yeah.
Give me an example.
Okay. How about the story of Cadillac?
Okay.
In the mid-20th century, the brand was really struggling.
Really?
Yeah, and then something really interesting happened.
Okay.
Black consumers, especially those who had achieved a certain level of economic success,
Right.
they started embracing Cadillac.
Interesting.
They saw it as the symbol of achievement, of upward mobility.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what?
What?
Their patronage really played a huge role in turning Cadillac's fortunes around.
That's fascinating. You wouldn't think of like a car brand being tied to social movement.
Really?
But it sounds like Black consumers were making a statement.
They were demonstrating a model that we see throughout history, using economic leverage to drive social change.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about buying Cadillacs.
Right.
It was about supporting businesses that aligned with their values and aspiration.
Yeah, and we see that today
We
with this, focus on supporting Black-owned businesses.
It's directly linked,
Yeah, to the legacy of economic empowerment
to that legacy
that these model labor movements champion.
Exactly.
So it's not just about, our individual choices.
Right.
It's about collective economic power.
Yeah.
And how it can be used to make a difference.
It's a powerful concept.
It is. And it's a concept rooted in the labor movement, right?
Think about it.
Yeah.
Collective bargaining.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about workers coming together,
Yeah.
leveraging their collective power to negotiate for better wages,
Right.
better working conditions.
Right. That same principle applies in other areas of life, too.
It does.
Like supporting those businesses that
Yeah.
align with your values.
Exactly.
Before we move on, I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier.
Sure.
The role of Black labor in building HBCUs. These institutions have been so important for Black education and advancement.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me more about that connection to the labor movement?
It's an incredible story, really.
Yeah.
One of self-reliance and community investment.
Mm-hmm.
See, building these institutions often relied on the skills and labor of Black workers themselves.
Wow.
It showed this commitment to upliftment that went beyond just individual gain.
It's about investing in the future of their communities.
Exactly.
Creating these spaces where Black students could thrive and reach their full potential.
Yeah.
That's a powerful example of how the labor movement's values extended beyond just, workplace issues.
Oh, yeah.
It was about creating a better future for everyone.
It really was.
And this is a great transition into our next topic.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, which is about the power of collective action
Okay.
and how that played out in these model labor movements.
I'm all ears. Let's dive in.
All right, let's do it. So we're talking about this power of collective action, and our audio source, it really emphasizes this,
Oh, yeah.
drawing these parallels with figures like A. Philip Randolph.
Right. A really important figure.
Yeah, it calls these movements the backbone of the dream,
I love that phrase.
which really captures their essence,
It does.
What do you think?
It absolutely does. I mean, Black labor has always been essential to the fabric of American society,
Mm-hmm.
from fields to factories, railroads to shipyards.
Yeah.
Their contributions have been vital in building this nation's prosperity.
Hmm.
But what's fascinating about Randolph is that he understood the power of organized labor, went way beyond, specific industries. He saw it as a vehicle for broader social change.
So he wasn't just focused on, like, better wages for porters or something. We're seeing bigger.
Much wider lens, yeah.
Yeah.
He was a visionary leader. He organized porters, led marches, advocated for fair labor practices for all workers, really.
And his efforts, along with countless others, really paved the way for a lot of the labor rights that we just take for granted today.
Oh, absolutely.
It makes you think, like we often talk about these individual heroes of these movements.
Right.
But it was really the collective effort.
Right, the collective effort, that's what made the difference.
Yeah.
It's a key takeaway from these model movements. Individual leaders are important, but lasting change requires
That force,
the collective force, pushing for the same goals.
Randolph understood that.
He did.
That to achieve lasting change, you need solidarity, unity, and a shared commitment.
A common goal, yeah.
It's a reminder that we can accomplish so much more when we work together.
Oh, for sure.
When we unite in our demands for fairness and equality.
Precisely. And it begs the question, how do we continue to advocate for those fair labor practices today? What lessons can we learn from these historical movements to address the issues that we're facing right now?
Right, because it's not enough to just admire their achievements.
No.
We need to apply their strategies.
Yeah, in our own time.
Yeah. It's easy to look back and be like, wow, those movements were powerful.
Right.
But the real challenge is, how do we translate that energy and effectiveness to today's problems?
One of the key things these historical movements teach us is that we need to be more than just consumers.
Okay.
We need to be active citizens. We need to hold those in power accountable.
Right.
And demand better working conditions, better wages for everyone.
Yeah.
It's about engaging with the political process, advocating for policies that actually support workers, and supporting those organizations that are fighting for economic justice.
It sounds like it's about recognizing that we're not just individuals in a system,
right?
But we have this collective power to actually shape that system.
Exactly. Now, looking to the future, our presentation also highlights something else. This idea of building generational wealth within Black communities. This, too, is connected to the labor movement's legacy.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. Think about it. Labor movements fought for things like fair wages, right? Access to education. Those are the foundations of building wealth, not just for individuals, but for families and entire communities.
Across generations.
Across generations, exactly. And that's crucial because generational wealth, it's not just about accumulating money. It's about creating those opportunities, that security for future generations.
It's like you're building a foundation that can be passed on.
Exactly.
And built upon by those who come after you.
Yeah, it's a massive long-term goal.
It is. What are some concrete strategies for making that happen?
Well, the presentation highlights 3.
Okay.
The first is financial literacy and education. It's paramount, empowering individuals and families to make informed decisions about their money. It's crucial, understanding things like saving, investing, managing debt.
Right.
Without that knowledge, it's a lot harder to build and sustain wealth.
It's not just about having the money.
No.
It's about knowing how to use it wisely.
Right.
To create that lasting stability.
Exactly. The second strategy is supporting Black-owned businesses. This means providing them with mentorship, access to capital, opportunities for growth.
And this builds on that concept we talked about earlier, right?
It does.
About using economic power to create change.
Yeah, when you support Black-owned businesses, you're not just buying a product or service.
Right.
You're investing in that community.
It's about recognizing that where we spend our money matters.
It does.
It can be a form of activism almost, right?
It can be.
A way to support the kind of future that we want to see.
Absolutely.
That's a third strategy.
The third is promoting affordable housing and home ownership.
Okay.
This creates that foundation for generational wealth that can be passed down through families. Think about it. Home ownership is often the biggest asset most families acquire.
Yeah.
But systemic barriers have often made it harder for Black families to achieve that.
Right.
So this strategy is about addressing those barriers and creating a more level playing field.
So it's not just about individual responsibility.
Right.
It's about acknowledging and dismantling those systems that create inequity
Yeah, that's key.
in the first place.
It is.
This whole conversation is making me think about something you mentioned earlier
Okay.
about the economic power of the Black community. Can you remind me about those numbers?
Absolutely. Our sources point out that Black buying power in the U.S. exceeded $1.8 trillion in 2022.
Wow, that number is staggering.
It's huge.
It really highlights the economic influence of the Black community. It makes you think, if that kind of spending power was strategically directed,
Right.
what kind of impact could it have?
It's a powerful reminder that Black Americans are a vital force in the economy. They contribute significantly to the GDP through entrepreneurship,
Right.
labor, and cultural industries.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground,
We have.
from the railroads of Minnesota to the power of collective action, from Black innovation to the importance of building generational wealth.
It's all connected.
It's clear that the African-American labor movement's impact,
Yeah,
it goes far beyond any one place or time.
absolutely.
It's a story that resonates across the nation and continues to shape our world today.
And it's a story that's still unfolding.
That's true.
The fight for economic justice, for fair labor practices,
Yeah,
for a more equitable future, it's an ongoing struggle.
it is.
And it requires our continued attention and action.
We can't afford to become complacent.
Right.
We need
Yeah.
to continue learning from these model movements.
Yes.
Adapting their strategies, applying them to the challenges we face. I'm so glad we had the opportunity to dive into this topic together.
Me too.
It's been enlightening and inspiring.
It has.
But before we wrap up,
Okay.
I have one final question.
All right.
What specific steps can we as individuals take to ensure that the legacy of this movement translates into, tangible progress for future generations?
That's a great question, and it's one we should all be asking ourselves, It's not enough to simply admire the accomplishments of the past.
Right.
We need to carry the torch forward.
Yeah.
So let's explore that in our final segment.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so we've talked about this incredible legacy of the African-American labor movement, but it's not just about looking back,
No.
and admiring what they accomplished.
It's about action.
It's about figuring out how to apply those lessons today, right?
Right.
Like, what can we do as individuals to carry that torch forward
Yeah.
and actually make a difference?
That is the crucial question, right? It is.
We can draw inspiration from the past, but the real work is taking action in the present.
Right.
We got to move beyond just acknowledging these movements.
Yeah.
We need to actively engage in this ongoing struggle for economic justice.
So what does that look like, practically speaking?
Okay.
What are some tangible steps that we can take?
Well, the first thing is we need to educate ourselves.
Okay.
I mean, we've touched on so many themes in this deep dive,
We have.
but it's really just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Dive deeper into the history of these model movements,
Mm-hmm.
understand their strategies, learn about the issues facing workers today.
Right.
The more informed we are, the more effective our actions will be.
Knowledge is power, right.
That's right.
But it's not enough to just, read a book
No.
or listen to a podcast.
Right.
How do we translate that knowledge into action?
There are so many ways to get involved.
Okay. You can support organizations that are fighting for workers' rights, advocate for policies that promote economic justice, use your voice to speak out against injustice.
Right.
Remember those tactics we talked about earlier, like marches and boycotts?
Yeah.
Those are still relevant today.
So it's about finding ways to amplify the voices of those who are often marginalized or silenced.
Exactly. And remember that concept of collective action we discussed.
Yeah.
That's still incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Join unions, participate in protests, organize with others who share your value.
There's strength in numbers.
There is. When we work together, we can create real change.
It's like that saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
That's a perfect way to put it. And remember, change doesn't happen overnight.
It doesn't.
It takes sustained effort, dedication, willingness to keep pushing forward, even when things get tough.
And that can be hard. It's easy to get discouraged, especially when you see how deep some of these, systemic issues are.
I know.
But these model movements teach us that persistence is key.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of individual actions either.
Okay.
We talked about supporting Black-owned businesses.
Right.
But that principle applies more broadly,
Yeah.
Be conscious of where you spend your money.
Mm-hmm.
Support companies that align with your values.
Right.
Advocate for ethical business practices.
So it's about being mindful consumers,
Yeah,
recognizing that our choices have an impact.
exactly. And it's not just about spending money.
Right.
It's about investing in your community.
Hmm.
Volunteer your time. Mentor young people. Support initiatives that are creating opportunities for others.
It sounds like it all comes back to that idea of collective responsibility.
It does.
We all have a role to play
Mm-hmm.
in building a more just and equitable society.
That's the heart of it, the legacy of these model labor movements.
Yeah.
It's not just about historical events.
Right.
It's a call to action.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that this fight for economic justice is ongoing
It is.
and that we all have a responsibility to carry the torch forward.
This deep dive has been incredibly thought-provoking.
Good.
It's given me a lot to reflect on,
Mm-hmm.
and I hope our listeners are feeling the same way.
I hope so.
What's the one key takeaway you hope people leave with today?
I hope they leave with a sense of empowerment.
Okay.
These model movements teach us that even when faced with overwhelming challenges,
Mhm.
ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they come together
Right.
with a shared purpose.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
You're welcome.
It's been an honor to explore this topic with you.
The honor was all mine. And remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Keep learning, keep engaging, and keep fighting for a better future.
That's a perfect note to end on.
Is it?
It is. Thanks for listening, everyone.
A Philip Randolph led the call. Freedom and fairness for workers all. Through strikes and marches we made it clear. Black labor shaped the progress.